You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects every bite you take to the bigger world. Here we talk with thought leaders from many different disciplines for insights into how food, its production, marketing, history, politics, business, and more shape the way we eat, live, and connect. Because food isn't just food, it's health, community, politics, and economy, all emanating from the center of your plate. I am your host, Dana DiPrima, and today I'm joined by Evan Harrison. Evan is the CEO of Kiss the Ground, but before this role, he was a pioneer in digital media and music. He helped transform iHeartRadio into a multi-platform content company, created groundbreaking music programs at AOL, and held leadership roles at Univision, Town Square Media, and as a music festival producer. His career in storytelling and media innovation now shapes how he's bringing awareness to soil health and regenerative agriculture. Kiss the Ground is a nonprofit best known for its films Kiss the Ground in 2020, narrated by Woody Harrelson with appearances from Gisele Bündchen and Tom Brady, and its follow-up Common Ground in 2023, featuring Laura Dern, Donald Glover, Rosario Dawson, and others. Beyond the films, the organization produces daily content, offers training, and has just begun giving grants to farmers trying regenerative practices who will be featured in their upcoming content as they progress in their regenerative journeys. Kiss the Ground is focused on regenerative agriculture and healthy soil as the solution to many of the challenges we face today, from human health to climate resilience. In our conversation, Evan shares how Kiss the Ground is using media and storytelling to bring regenerative agriculture into the mainstream. We talk about the progress in public awareness, the fuzziness around definitions, why Kiss the Ground chooses hopeful narratives over crisis messaging, and how their farmer grants and training programs aim to support real change on the ground.
Kiss the Ground, the conversation started and the formation of the org began in 2013. And if you think about it, while that's not that long ago, it was really early days to have a conversation about healthy soil and a term that was very unfamiliar called regenerative agriculture. When you Googled that term, there wasn't much coming up at the time. So Ryland Engelhart came from the restaurant business, and he was in the vegan food space, a restaurant chain that his dad started in California. And they learned about healthy soil and that animal inclusion can be a meaningful part of the solution, and how healthy soil ties into so many important things such as human health, planetary health, and really the ecosystem approach to farming being at the core of what it is a real game changer. And it took years to get the film off the ground in 2020, which was named after our work, Kiss the Ground. And that film really was the genesis of the early days of the gathering, and we'll call it the beginning of the movement in the US, where you had academia and farmers and filmmakers and activists all start to come together and align around, wow, regenerative agriculture and healthy soil is a viable solution for these massive crises we're facing. And the big topic at the time was climate change. And climate change, as we know, has become a polarized and political topic over the years, which feels kind of silly, but that's the reality. We did some research, and 50% of the US adult population feels that climate change is somebody else's issue to fix, and they don't really feel they have a responsibility to be involved or engage in the climate discussion. Yet, human wellness, on the other hand, about 76% of people connect human wellness to their food purchase choices. And they want to buy food that will make them healthier.
Evan and his team conducted some research which found that 50% of the U.S. adult population revealed a striking divide in engagement. Most people see climate change as someone else's problem, something to be fixed by others, and feel little personal responsibility to take part in the conversation. Human wellness, however, hits much closer to home. About 76% of respondents actively connect their food choices to their health, seeking out foods that nourish their bodies and enhance their well-being. This suggests that while environmental issues may feel distant, personal health is a powerful motivator that shapes daily decisions.
When you look at the evolution of the early conversation about regeneration and healthy soil and where we stand today, it's widely understood that we are unhealthy, that we have metabolic challenges. It's widely understood that the food system is broken. But if you scratch a couple layers beneath that, there's a whole lot of confusion. So when I joined Kiss the Ground in 2022 and looked at the numbers, everybody was talking as if everybody knew what we were talking about. And yet only 4% of the population in the United States had heard the term regenerative agriculture and could answer a multiple choice, what it is. So really, we were talking in an echo chamber. So what we said was, all right, our theory of change is that we need to get the message out to the masses and get that message to the tipping point that healthy soil is a really important ingredient to solve some of the massive challenges that are undeniably only getting worse, with human wellness first and foremost, because we all eat and we really don't know the sourcing of our food. So we're focusing go forward at Kiss the Ground. We've been saying the foundation to really become a media and awareness company over the course of the last 3 years. We went from producing a couple pieces of content a year to now we're producing and distributing content daily. And the way we're approaching that is not everybody wants to learn all of the detail about the microbiome and how the nutrients make their way from healthy soil to the plant and the animal eating the plant to us. Yet, people do want to be healthy and they want to make food choices that make them healthier. So we're producing content that is very entertainment focused with a little nugget of education, all the way down to much deeper education, like a 90-minute course to learn the detail so you can become an advocate of regenerative agriculture. And we're creating that content, producing and distributing daily to get the movement to the tipping point. So it's an inclusive approach with storytelling. And then for those who learn and want to get more educated, we have an education program where we have free resources for people who just want to go shopping and know that they're making healthy choices. These are the labels to look for. So I'll give you another little statistic. While 76% of us want to make informed choices that aid our wellness with food choices, people are confused. Only 50% of the population reads food labels, and less than half understand them. So the number one claim that people react to in the supermarket is natural, and right behind it is fresh. 88% gravitate towards those terms which are not regulated and don't mean anything. So there's a whole lot of confusion. So with our education program, we're trying to really simplify that conversation and tune people into what will become the healthier choices. And then we have a partnerships program that's all about bringing companies along for the ride and educating their teams first internally, and then bringing that message out to their end consumer. So that's our approach. That's what we're focused on. And we renewed that research that I mentioned that we started about 3 years ago, only a couple of months ago, and that 4% awareness is now 7%. So the movement is heading in the right direction. And we know that the role we're playing with awareness is critical. And along with that is really the farmers at the center of everything we do. We cannot tell enough stories about farmers and really put the spotlight on farmers of all different walks of life, different size farms, different problems, different challenges. We're really putting a spotlight on the farmer and trying to solve that disconnect so people have a little more understanding of how the food is grown and where it's sourced from.
So let me go back to 2013 for a second. You're talking about people not really understanding what regenerative was. Some of them have heard the term but couldn't really define it. And I hear a lot about farming buzzwords and whether we're talking about rotationally grazed and people getting a sense for that, or cage free, or any number of those things that you mentioned are on the labels that people may not be reading and aren't necessarily understanding the difference between one and the other, or the ones that are meaningful and the ones that aren't. And I'm a little bit concerned about some of these buzzwords start out and they're good, and then people realize they don't mean what they thought they meant and they lose their power. And I'm just curious sort of where we stand with regenerative, because regenerative is still a little fuzzy, isn't it?
There's a lot of conversation, and I hear that topic brought up routinely. And there's a lot of schools of thought of, nope, it's got to be certified regenerative and organic, ROC. No, it has to be regenerative because organic is too limiting. There's a lot of debate. A lot of farmers are doing all of the right things and cannot afford to pay.
In the United States, farmers seeking certification face a significant financial hurdle. Organic certification can cost anywhere from $400 to over $2,000 a year for small to mid-sized farms with larger or more complex operations, often paying much more. These expenses cover application fees, annual renewals, and inspections, often billed at $40 to $70 an hour plus travel costs. To help offset this burden, the USDA's Organic Certification Cost Share Program reimburses up to 75% of certification fees, capped at $750 per year per scope. But many farmers still report paying around $1,000 to $2,000 annually out of pocket. Regenerative certifications, such as Regenerative Organic Certified, add another layer of cost, with application fees ranging from $350 to $1,000 and annual fees of $250 to $500, depending on the farm size and the crop value. While these certifications open doors to premium markets, the upfront costs remain a barrier for many small farmers, making financial support programs and alternative verification systems increasingly important.
There are some certifications where there are loopholes and not everything is perfect. The way I look at regenerative and the way we talk about it, it's an ongoing process. The first thought of regenerative agriculture practices is it's based on context. No two farms are going to have the same solution and the same exact challenges. So we work with a winemaker in Willamette Valley, and she was talking about how literally 100 yards away, some of her vines have different challenges because of the most modest gain in altitude. So really, when you look at regenerative agriculture, we have a couple hundred farms on our map already. By the end of the year, we're going to have 1,000 farms we work with on our regenerative agriculture map. And that map is all about connecting local communities with those farmers. The way we vet those farms and put them on a regenerative map is they participate with 3 regenerative agriculture practices. Certifications are great, but it's early days. And we didn't want to get mired in the argument about, no, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing this. Farming is really difficult. And if a farmer takes the time to learn about healthy soil and is really like an artist who's experimenting a lot with different solutions, to minimize the pesticides, herbicides, and to try and work with an ecosystem approach to farming with regenerative grazing practices, making sure areas aren't overgrazed, with using cover crops, experimenting with different kinds of cover crops. As they're doing 2 or 3 practices, they're on their way and the journey has begun. And that's really what we're looking for, is farmers who are doing the work to try and do the right thing. So when we get the term regenerative out there, a lot of people say to me, oh, it's going to be greenwashed. A lot of companies are, using the term falsely. Correct. Agreed. That said, it's hard to cut through clutter right now. And if the term regenerative gets out there and is connected to healthy soil, not everybody needs to understand the practices and the principles. That alone, to me, is a step in the right direction. And you're right, cage free. There's so many different terminologies that can be used that are still just a cover for the same old practices. So, we try and demystify a lot of that and really simplify it. Some people want to go really deep. Some people simply have to be able to buy food that they can afford. And of course, they want to be healthy. And we want to make that accessible to everybody.
In the films that you guys have put out, Kiss the Ground and Common Ground, you've really taken an approach that's very hopeful. And I'm curious where you all stand in terms of that. Meaning, are you getting more flies with honey, or is it sometimes important to bang the drum that there's a crisis? Like, what's the balance there?
Yeah, so our filmmaker partners, Josh and Rebecca Tickell, they named the first film Kiss the Ground because Ryland, who started the organization, was talking their ear off about soil health. And Ryland is a very, very optimistic, positive force of nature. And when I joined and really honed in on what is the voice of Kiss the Ground, what is the approach of Kiss the Ground, and why, we landed at, we're all about inclusion, inspiration, and hopeful and positive. There is a very, very good argument for doom and gloom. The world is ending. We're all dying. Our health is awful. There's a solid argument for that. That's just not the role we're going to occupy. That's not our lane, our space. So we felt like we need to tell positive stories and inspire folks without shaming people. And my feed alone, as I've been learning, my background was in digital music and promoting artists in the earliest days of my career. And I started learning from farmers and realized that farmers and a lot of artists I've worked with have a lot of similar traits, and grit being one of them, charisma, work ethic, all of those things. There's just so much hopefulness to shine a light on. It seemed apparent to me that if we focused on that, it would be really, something that travels and spreads, and something we need right about now. As I've learned, and as I dive deeper, my feed continues to get filled up with so many confusing messages. There's a lot of look over here, this is bad for you, this is bad for you, this is bad for you. We like to focus on little steps in the right direction and really messages of positivity and hope. And there are a lot out there. We just granted $500,000 across 215 farms that spans 76,000 acres that are now being transitioned into regenerative practices. And we helped farmers solve a lot of different problems. And every farmer that I met with, of the 15 who we gave large sums of money to for equipment and supplies, all of their challenges were different and all of their backgrounds were different. But every one of them was so hopeful and so proud to be doing the difficult work that they're doing. And to me, that's the story that we need to be telling.
I think when people who are not in the echo chamber are thinking about farmers or are asked about farmers, the number one thing that comes to mind is food, which aligns with your research in terms of, okay, getting good food is going to make me healthy. We're all on the same page there. I think when you get to that climate crisis issue and climate change, that's not necessarily what comes up when you are talking about farmers. And I just wanted to see if you could talk a little bit to the power of farmers and small regenerative farmers to be able to move that needle, like legitimately move a climate issue.
Yeah, while we don't lead with planetary health, it's always a close second for us. We talk about human and planetary wellness, and we draw that connection in how it all works, in that we've all experienced massive environmental events that have, at the very minimum, inconvenienced us. And then on the extreme, some of us have lost homes from fires, from floods, that kind of thing. So when we talk about healthy soil and the benefits of healthy soil and how that makes the planet healthier, we start with, okay, when healthy soil has a rain event, it's able to absorb so much more water as opposed to that water running off with chemicals into rivers, into our water supply, and then, again, back to human wellness. So we start with the absorption. And then we talk about the sequestering of carbon. And that's usually when, sometimes eyes gloss over, but some people say, right, I'm aware of the carbon sequestration issue, but how does that play into healthy soil? And then we go on to explain that it actually is fuel for the soil, whereas a carbon hangover from fossil fuels in the atmosphere is not productive. Yet when it is sequestered through plants and through trees into the soil, that really enables the magic underground to start to happen and fuels the ecosystem, which brings the nutrients to the plants and in turn to our animals, and how it all works all together.
Beyond water absorption and carbon storage, healthy soil is also a living ecosystem teeming with microbes, fungi, and insects that quietly orchestrate cycles of life beneath the surface. These organisms break down organic matter, recycle nutrients, and create a sponge-like structure that helps plants thrive without heavy chemical inputs. A teaspoon of rich soil can contain more microorganisms than there are people on Earth, each contributing to processes that protect crops from disease, improve yields, and even enhance the nutritional density of food. This underground biodiversity acts as a natural insurance system for farmers, buffering against droughts, floods, and other climate extremes while simultaneously reducing dependence on costly fertilizers and pesticides. In this way, the health of soil isn't just about what it holds. It's about the resilience it builds for ecosystems, food systems, and the communities that depend on them.
So we really believe that the more land that has cover on it as opposed to bare soil, that it's a game changer, not only because you will have less runoff when the rain comes, you will absorb more, but you will sequester more carbon. And as these small and medium-sized farms are supported by individuals, and as individuals are shopping in a way that they say, hey, regenerative, healthy soil, that's good for me. And that's what I care about first and foremost. Policy will catch up and government aid will start to fill in the cracks. We're not going to just count on the farm bill, which comes every 5 years. We're really counting on our theory of change being the tipping point where consumer spend and consumer passion, starting with the purchase power for food, begins the process. Subsidies will follow.
When you are talking about the farms that you have given grants to, you mentioned that you were able to help them with some sort of a transition or to solve big problems on their farms. Now, obviously, one part of that is you're giving them the financial capability to buy equipment that they need, also potentially some training. I'm just curious what position you all sit in terms of being the experts and vis-a-vis what the farmers are doing.
So we have a gentleman on our board named Rick Brown. He's been a regenerative farmer for quite some time. He's a fifth generation farmer, and he headed up a committee for us with some other farmers to dole out the grants to make sure we really had a vast array of, first time farmers, female farmers. Like, we really wanted to spread the love and help solve a whole bunch of different problems, not only so we can aid those farmers, but also so we could tell the stories about those farmers, which would then in turn inspire more farmers to start trying regenerative practices. So the expertise comes from farmers themselves and some experts who have tried different things in the field, making those decisions.
And the farmers, are they coming to you then and saying, we would like a grant for X, this is what's happening on our farm? Or are they invited to apply because you want them to change their practices? How does the whole thing come together?
Yeah, so we reach and engage a couple million people a month. I mentioned we now produce and distribute content daily. So with that, our audience has grown, our engagement has grown, our email list has grown. So when we put out the bat signal that, we're giving out $500,000 directly to farmers, we don't have a problem finding them or them finding us. And we have partners who've been in the space for a long time, educating farmers on the ground. So we partner with on the ground educators, and part of the $500,000 went to $1,000 signups for these on the ground education programs as well. And then when they put out the signal that Kiss the Ground is subsidizing this, we get plenty of applications.
And the money that you have for those grants, that comes from corporate partners and other places as well?
Yeah, so our business model, we're a 501c3, we're audience funded. So we have individual donors, both large and micro. And we have a new partnerships program where we work with about 20 companies who make donations to our organization, and then foundations and grants. So it's about a third, a third, a third. And we operate on a really, really small budget. So all of the personnel and all of the content creation, education creation, marketing, everything we do, our cost for that is about $3 million a year. So we keep that cost really small, getting out the awareness portion. And then any surplus on top of that will continue to go directly to farmers. So I'm trying to get us to $4 million. The next grant we put out is $1 million, and then upwards from there, because I'm telling you, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's what it's all about. Of course, we need to grow the awareness, but the best way to do it is by actually awarding farmers with the money they need for their electric fence for rotational grazing, with their seeds, with their livestock, with whatever it is they need. We have one farmer in Atlanta who has felt for some time now that their produce is more nutrient dense when the soil has been healed through regenerative practices. And this gentleman's applying, I think, a $15,000 grant to do some testing with a local university to really prove that his produce is more nutrient dense. So lots of different challenges. And like I said, that's really where the rubber meets the road. It's super rewarding to not only give that grant, but then to document the journey that farmer is on with these new regenerative practices with the funds they've received.
Is this something that you're planning on doing every year?
Yeah, so we announced at the very end of last year that we were going to donate $500,000. That money is already out the door. So we've already awarded all the farmers, and we've told the early stages of what the farmers' intentions are. And then in the spring, we'll start to document how it's going. So the content creation is a really, really important part of it. And then my plan is by the end of 26, we'll announce our next grant, and the cycle will continue from there.
You mentioned government aid and the Farm Bill and all of that. And as many of my listeners know, we talk about this a lot. that grants have been canceled out from under a lot of farms, especially the small farms or the ones that are dealing with climate resiliency. I'm curious what you think. I mean, obviously, that's a current reality. It could shift back to supporting those issues and farms. But I'm curious what you think about the sort of this public-private, the roles of different entities out there. If our farmers are really best suited by being supported by the government or by private entities, what you think of all that.
It's a massive challenge, and we have chosen to focus on where we can have the greatest impact in the shortest period of time. And that's our business model. When I joined Kiss the Ground in 22, we had just formed a coalition that was called Regenerate America. And we spent $1 million really making a lot of positive noise in the political landscape. Really, our forte is the voice and the message, but money doesn't stretch very far in politics. So what we shifted towards was, let's focus on what we can control. I feel so much gratitude handing $500,000 directly to farmers. I feel the impact. I see the impact. Whereas that same money going towards advocacy for policy is not going to stretch as far. So really what I'm looking at now is we can only control so much, and it's a chaotic environment at best. And we have to take advantage of what we can do ourselves right now. And that's what we're focused on. So to transition 76,000 acres and affect the lives of 215 farmers and in turn their communities, that's meaningful. And that thing starts to catch on. So as we announce our next farmer grants, as we continue to tell the stories from the outcomes from this farmer grant, I believe that will inspire more money coming directly to our organization, which in turn will inspire more money going directly to farmers, and then other organizations and there will be other funding mechanisms, not government controlled in the interim, to get more money out to these small and mid-sized farms. And from there, policy will catch up.
Tell me, when you're looking at the work that you've done, obviously sharing all of these messages and now working more directly, specifically with farmers through grants, are there any unexpected lessons that you all have learned?
Every day is a new lesson that, wow, never thought of that challenge, never thought of that challenge. What I've learned is I need to be surrounded by experts. I know how to create content and how to really get messages out and how to run a business. And 501c3 is a business because we have to stretch our dollars. It's all about impact. So I've learned that there's going to be a lot of disagreement among scholars. There's going to be a lot of disagreement in the industry, in the consumer packaged goods industry. So I've really learned that we need a lot of expertise around us, and we need to be very okay with not having specific agreement to every issue, rather just not killing momentum. That's the biggest thing I've learned is if we get too bogged down in all of the specific issues, the movement dies on the vine, and we can't have that. We need positivity and we need forward momentum.
And you mentioned you have this one particular farmer, Mr. Brown, on your board. What other kind of experts are you surrounding yourself with?
Well, you've seen a lot of really the rock star farmers in our films. We have hundreds of farmers who we work with across the country. And Rick is actually putting together a farmer committee so we can more efficiently get word out and really help promote the work we're doing amongst the farmer community. So that committee will be based with, Rick, his expertise, what started with regeneration practices that included hemp and textiles. And we've got some farmer relations in Indiana on massive farms. We have farmer relations in North Dakota, which all different regions, different issues, different size farms. We've done deep dive stories. We have a 10-minute mini documentary series we do called Stories of Regeneration. We've had millions of people watch these films. 10 minutes seems to be the sweet spot where people really are willing to lend 10 minutes to dive deep and see what the problem is and what the solution is of a farmer. And we got to know a farmer named Yadi Wang, who did some amazing work just outside of Tucson with regenerative practices, really bringing back some lush landscape and healthy soil. So with all of this storytelling, even with our 90-second features, which do really well on Instagram, called 5 with a Farmer, we get to meet a lot of different farmers and hear a lot of different perspectives. So that is our community that we bounce all of our challenges and all of our messages off. And we get a lot of different responses and a lot of different angles and suggestions.
You've obviously brought your expertise to bear on this incredible initiative. And I'm curious, what was the bug that started you in this direction?
The bug started very organically for me. While music was one of my main passions, and I was fortunate to really do great things in the music industry, my outside of work was fitness. I loved to sweat, especially when I lived in New York City and was on airplanes every week. It was half marathons and fitness to keep me sharp. But surfing has always been by far my biggest love outside of beyond music and family. I'd say that's at the top. And I was asked to join the board of the Surfrider Foundation. And I started listening to the CEO, who was, I think he's a double PhD, and he knew all the science. I didn't understand all the intricacies, but I understood the problem and I understood the solutions we talked about. And it was incredibly frustrating because none of the solutions seemed global. They seemed very roll up your sleeves. We'll do a beach cleanup. We'll lobby against the big oil companies. We'll try and decommission some of the oil rigs, that kind of thing. It seemed slow moving. And my daughter would come with me and we would produce and help with the events. And she got the bug for environmental causes. And she brought me the film Kiss the Ground. Interestingly, I was promoting a music festival and she asked me if I could help promote her micro event of this film screening of a film with some old guy who I probably heard of who narrates it. And that's Woody Harrelson. And I looked at it was meant to be. So I looked at the trailer. What is this? I'd never heard of it. I'd never heard of regenerative agriculture and how it all ties in. So that was the bug for me. And I decided that I wanted my skill set, if it could, move forward something in the wellness and or environmental space. And Kiss the Ground found me, I found them, and that's it.
What's the biggest challenge that you're facing?
The biggest challenge is funding, awareness, and speed. So everybody is competing for attention and for voice. And big companies with big marketing budgets are adding a lot of noise and a lot of confusion to the marketplace. And, like I said before, I see the silver lining in that as the term regenerative is being used. Some of it is pure, some of it is a little less pure, but it's still getting the term regenerative agriculture into the mainstream. And we've really only just begun. So I believe with the right guardrails and the right intention and the right messaging, we're going to get to a very, very meaningful place where you have that 20% of consumers who know just enough to say, okay, soil health, where is my food coming from? Reading the ingredients, making regenerative choices, that really starts to move mountains. So, that's where I believe it's heading. And right now, until then, it's all about reaching mindful audiences with that message. And that takes funding.
What's one thing that you would have listeners who are here with us, what's one thing that you would have them do right now?
I always just ask everybody to just go to kisstheground.com, sign up for our newsletter. The reason we produce content every day is some people will want to send their friends a shopping guide. Some people will want to send their friends a link for 2-for-1 to take a 90-minute course on regenerative agriculture. Some will send our award-winning mini documentary on these 2 best friend farmers in North Dakota. So just sign up for our newsletter. When content speaks to you, share it, dive in deeper. And if you're moved by the work we're doing, donate, and then we'll be able to reach more farmers and more people.
Evan Harrison, CEO of Kiss the Ground. As you heard, his path from media and music to soil and farming has shaped the way the organization operates today. With films like Kiss the Ground and Common Ground, they've brought regenerative agriculture and soil health into the mainstream conversation, leaning on hopeful storytelling rather than doom and gloom. For Evan, the heart of the work is keeping farmers in the spotlight, which will be the future of Kiss the Ground's features and daily content. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to give it 5 glorious stars and a written review on Apple Podcasts. It helps more people like you find the show, and I'm always so appreciative of new reviews. One bite is everything. It starts on your plate, and it has a big reach. It's a food podcast, and a politics podcast, and a health, community, and economy podcast, because food touches quite literally everything. If today's episode sparked something for you, remember, the stories you hear here don't end when the episode does. Through the 4 Farmers movement, these stories become action, supporting small farmers and bringing eaters like you closer to the people who make your food possible. Learn more at 4farmersmovement.com and follow along on Instagram at XOXOFarmGirl. And of course, connect with Kiss the Ground. Watch its amazing films and dive a little deeper into the dirt. Thanks for listening to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects every bite you take to the bigger world. I am your host, Dana DiPrima. This episode was co-produced by Sonia Dillon with sound design and original music by Russell Chapa. I will see you here again next week. Until then, eat like it matters, because it does.